Hello, my dear family. My name is Isabel, and I'm 67 years old, living here in Lima. Today I need to share with you the most painful story of my life, because sometimes we need to speak our truth to heal our hearts. It was April 23rd, a Thursday night that started like any other. I had made Manuel his evening meal, just soft rice and chicken broth because of his condition, and helped him to bed around 9 o'clock. You know how it is when your husband starts forgetting things. The doctors called it early dementia, but to me, he was still my Manuel of 40 years. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up thirsty. You know that feeling when your mouth is dry like desert sand? I got up quietly, not wanting to wake anyone, and walked toward the kitchen. But as I passed Manuel's room, pause, voice breaking, I saw something that made my blood freeze in my veins. There was my daughter, Carmen, my own flesh and blood, 45 years old, standing over her father's bed with a pillow pressed down over his face. She was pushing down hard, and Manuel's legs were moving, fighting underneath the blanket like a fish out of water. My legs started shaking so badly I thought I would fall right there in the hallway. This was my Carmen, the little girl I used to rock to sleep while singing Arroz con leche, the daughter who called me every day, who brought me groceries every Sunday after Mass at Santa Rosa Church. I stood there frozen, watching my own daughter trying to. Voice drops to whisper, kill her father, kill my husband, the man who worked 16-hour days in the construction sites of Villa El Salvador, just to put food on our table, to send her to university. Without making a sound, I stepped backward into the shadows. My heart was beating so loud I was sure she would hear it. Carmen didn't see me. She was focused on what she was doing. I managed to reach the kitchen, and that's when my whole body started trembling like leaves in a winter storm. I sat down on my old wooden chair, the same one my mother left me when she passed, and I couldn't stop shaking. My hands were trembling so much I couldn't even pour myself water. All I could think was, Dios mío, what is happening to my family? You see, my dear friends, when you become a mother, you think you know your children's hearts better than your own. You change their diapers. You kiss their scraped knees. You teach them to pray before bed. But that night, I discovered that evil can live even in the hearts we love most. If you're watching this and you've experienced family betrayal, please know you're not alone. Subscribe to our channel because this is a safe space where we can share our deepest pains without judgment. Give this video a like if you've ever felt lost in your own home, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if you discovered something unthinkable about someone you love? I stayed in that kitchen for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. I kept thinking, this can't be real. This must be a nightmare. But when I heard Carmen's bedroom door close softly, I knew this was my reality. The next morning would bring decisions that would tear my family apart forever. But that night, sitting alone in my kitchen with the taste of betrayal bitter in my mouth, I learned that being a mother sometimes means facing truths that can destroy you. Sometimes the people we love most are capable of things that break our hearts into 1,000 pieces. Now that I'm a grandmother, I understand there are secrets we keep believing they protect the ones we love. But sometimes, my dear friends, those secrets become the poison that slowly kills a family from the inside. To understand why Carmen could do something so terrible to her own father, I need to tell you about my 40 years of marriage with Manuel. From the outside, we looked like any other family in our neighborhood of Miraflores. Manuel left for work every morning at 5:30. I prepared breakfast and got the children ready for school. We went to Sunday Mass together at the cathedral. But behind our front door, there was a different story. Manuel was a good provider, I'll give him that. He never let us go hungry, never missed a day of work. But when he came home, when he had been drinking with his construction crew friends, that's when our house became a battlefield. I remember Carmen was maybe 8 years old. Little Diego was 6. They would run to their bedroom when they heard their father's heavy steps on our tile floor. I would find them later, huddled together in the closet, covering their ears while Manuel shouted at me about the food being cold, about the house being messy, about how I was raising the children wrong. "You are making them weak, Isabel," he would yell, throwing his work boots across the room. Children need discipline. Not your silly songs and kisses. I thought I was protecting them by staying quiet, by never talking back, by teaching them to hide when Daddy was angry. I would whisper to Carmen and Diego, Papa works very hard, mi amor. Sometimes adults get tired and say things they don't mean, but children see everything, don't they? They remember everything. Carmen learned to make herself invisible when Manuel was home. She became the perfect daughter, always quiet, always helpful, never asking for anything. She would help me serve his dinner without making a sound, wash the dishes while he watched his telenovelas, do her homework by candlelight when he said the electricity bill was too high. I see now that my silence taught her the wrong lessons. I taught her that men's anger was something women had to endure. I taught her that keeping peace was more important than speaking truth. I taught her to swallow her pain and smile. When she turned 15, we had her quinceañera at the parish hall. Manuel actually smiled that day, danced with her to Las Mañanitas, told everyone how proud he was of his beautiful daughter. But I saw something in Carmen's eyes that day, something cold and distant, like she was performing a role instead of celebrating. That night, after all the guests left, she helped me clean up without saying a word. When I asked her if she had enjoyed her party, she just looked at me and said, Mama, when I grow up, I'm never going to need anyone. Never. Those words should have been a warning, but I was too tired, too overwhelmed to understand what she meant. Years passed. Carmen finished school, got a job at the bank, never married. She said she wanted to take care of us, that we were her priority. I thought she was being a good daughter, staying close to family like we taught her. But now I understand she wasn't staying out of love. She was staying because she was waiting for her moment of control, waiting to have power over the man who had terrorized her childhood. Diego, on the other hand, left for Spain as soon as he could. I need to see the world, Mama, he told me when he was 22. There's nothing for me here. I cried when he left, but maybe he was the wise one. Maybe he understood that some houses hold too much pain to ever feel like home. All those years, I kept telling myself I was keeping our family together, but I was really just keeping our wounds fresh, never letting them heal. I was teaching my children that love means suffering in silence, that family means accepting the unacceptable. The night I saw Carmen with that pillow, I finally understood that my 40 years of silence had created a monster in my own daughter's heart. Money, my dear listeners, can transform angels into demons faster than you can say an Ave Maria. I learned this lesson in the most painful way possible when Manuel received his diagnosis. It was January of last year when we finally took Manuel to see Dr. Ramirez at the Hospital Nacional. For months, I had been making excuses for him. He's just tired from work. He's getting older. It's normal to forget things. But when he got lost coming home from the corner store, where he had bought bread for 30 years, I knew we needed help. Early onset dementia, Dr. Ramirez said, adjusting his glasses and speaking in that gentle voice doctors use when they're about to break your heart. It will progress slowly, but eventually he'll need full-time care. I felt the world spinning around me. Manuel, my strong husband, who could carry cement bags like they were pillows, who never forgot a soccer score or a friend's birthday, was losing his mind, piece by piece. But Carmen's reaction was different from mine. While I was crying in the hospital corridor, she was asking the doctor very specific questions. How long does he have? Will he be able to make decisions? Does he still have legal capacity? I should have paid attention to those questions. I should have seen the wheels turning in her mind. 3 days after the diagnosis, Carmen showed up at our house with a folder full of papers. Mama, we need to talk about practical things, she said, spreading documents across our kitchen table like she was dealing cards in a casino. Look, Papa owns this house free and clear. Plus there's the savings account from his pension and that little piece of land in Huancayo that belonged to Abuela Rosa. We need to make sure everything is organized before his condition gets worse. She kept using the word we, but I noticed all her suggestions benefited only her. Papa should change his will, she said. Diego abandoned us, Mama. He's been living his comfortable life in Madrid while I've been here taking care of you both. Why should he inherit anything? At first, her arguments made sense. Diego did leave. Carmen did stay. She visited us every Sunday, helped with grocery shopping, took Manuel to his medical appointments. She was being the devoted daughter while her brother was sending postcards from European vacations. But then her visits became more frequent, more intense. She would arrive with printouts from the internet about elderly care, about the costs of nursing homes, about how families go bankrupt caring for dementia patients. Mama, do you know how much a good care facility costs per month? More than Papa's entire pension. We'll lose everything if we don't plan ahead. She started bringing up Diego's absence obsessively. Remember when Papa had his heart attack 3 years ago? Where was Diego then? I was the one sleeping in the hospital chair. I was the one feeding Papa ice chips when he couldn't swallow. Every conversation became about money, about fairness, about who deserved what. She would sit with Manuel during his lucid moments talking sweetly. Papa, don't you think it's time to update your will? I mean, Diego has his own life now. I'm the one who's going to take care of you and Mama. Manuel, bless his confused heart, would just nod and smile. See, Miquita, whatever you think is best. I started noticing how Carmen's eyes would light up when she talked about our future security, how she had already calculated the value of everything we owned, how she spoke about Manuel's death like it was a business transaction waiting to happen. One evening in March, she brought a notary to our house. Just to make things official, Mama. We don't want any legal problems later. I watched my husband, this man who once ruled our household with an iron fist, sign papers he couldn't understand, giving control of his life to a daughter whose love had turned into something I didn't recognize. That night, after Carmen left with her signed documents, Manuel looked at me with one of his rare moments of clarity and said, Isabel, I'm scared of our daughter. There's something cold in her eyes now. Even in his confused state, he could sense what I was too afraid to admit. The little girl who used to hide in the closet had grown up to become something darker than the man she once feared. Money had awakened a demon in my daughter's heart, and I was too blind to see that she had already started planning her father's death. There are phone calls you never want to make, my dear friends. Calls that you know will change everything forever. But sometimes when your world is crumbling around you, you have no choice but to reach out to the only person who might understand your pain. After witnessing what Carmen did to her father, I sat in my kitchen until dawn broke through our small window. My hands were still shaking as I picked up my old Nokia phone, the same one Diego had sent me from Spain 2 years ago, because he worried I couldn't reach him in emergencies. It was 3 in the morning in Lima, which meant it was 9 in the morning in Madrid. I knew Diego would be having his coffee, getting ready for work at the engineering firm where he had built his new life. I dialed his number with trembling fingers, and when I heard his voice, Hola, Mama, so cheerful and loving I couldn't speak. I just started crying. Mama, what's wrong? Is it Papa? Did something happen? Diego, mi hijo, I managed to whisper. Your sister, Carmen. Last night I saw her. But how do you tell your son that his sister tried to murder their father? How do you find words for something so unthinkable? She what, Mama? Please, you're scaring me. She was trying to hurt your father with a pillow. Diego, I think she wanted to kill him. The silence on the other end of the line lasted forever. I could hear Diego breathing, processing what I had just told him. Are you sure, Mama? Maybe in the dark you saw something else. Maybe she was just adjusting his pillow. I wanted so badly for him to be right. I wanted to believe I had imagined the whole thing. But I knew what I saw. No, mijo. She was pressing down hard. Your father was fighting underneath. If I hadn't seen her, if I hadn't been there. Then Diego said something that made my blood freeze. Mama, Carmen called me last week. She did? She never told me. She was asking strange questions about when I planned to visit next, if I missed living in Peru, if I ever thought about moving back to take care of you and Papa. But the way she asked, it felt like she was making sure I would stay away. My heart sank deeper into my chest. This wasn't a moment of anger or desperation. This was planned. My daughter had been preparing for this. There's more, Mama. She asked me about Papa's health, how bad his dementia was getting. She said something like, "It must be so hard for you, knowing he's suffering and you can't do anything to help him." At the time, I thought she was just being emotional, but now we both understood that Carmen had been testing the waters, seeing if Diego would support the idea of ending their father's life. When he didn't take the bait, she decided to act alone. "Diego, what am I supposed to do? She's my daughter. I carried her in my womb for 9 months. I sang her to sleep every night. But now I don't recognize the person she's become. Mama, you have to call the police. How can I destroy my own daughter? How can I send her to prison? And how can you let her kill our father?" Those words hit me like a slap across the face. My son was right, but my mother's heart was breaking into a million pieces. Diego's voice became gentle again. "Mama, I know this is the hardest thing in the world, but Carmen isn't the little girl you remember anymore. Something inside her has changed, and if you don't stop her now, she'll try again. What if I'm wrong? What if I destroy our family for nothing?" "What family, Mama? Carmen has already destroyed it. She's turned love into hate, care into murder. The little girl who used to help you make empanadas is gone." After I hung up, I sat in that kitchen for hours, holding the phone like it was a lifeline. Diego's words echoed in my mind. She'll try again. I knew he was right. Carmen had tasted the power of holding her father's life in her hands, and the hunger in her eyes that night told me she wouldn't stop until she finished what she started. My daughter had crossed a line that no amount of mother's love could bring her back from, and I was the only one who could stop her from becoming a killer. Confronting your own child is one of the most difficult things a mother can do. It goes against every instinct we have, every protective feeling that has lived in our hearts since the moment we first held them as babies. But sometimes, my dear friends, love means having the courage to face the hardest truths. Carmen arrived the next evening for her usual Sunday visit, carrying a bag of groceries and wearing that sweet smile she had perfected over the years. She kissed my cheek and asked about Manuel, just like she always did. "How did Papa sleep last night, Mama? Any problems?" The casual way she asked that question made my stomach turn. I watched her unpack the groceries, bread from the panaderia, fresh fruit, Manuel's favorite dulce de leche cookies, and for a moment I almost convinced myself that I had imagined everything. But then I saw her glance toward Manuel's bedroom with those calculating eyes, and I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. "Carmen, we need to talk." "Of course, Mama. Let me just check on Papa first." "No." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Sit down, now." Something in my tone made her stop. She looked at me with surprise, maybe even a little fear. It had been years since I had spoken to her with such authority. "Carmen, I saw you last night." Her face didn't change at first. She just tilted her head like she didn't understand. "Saw me what, Mama?" "I saw you in your father's room. I saw what you were doing with the pillow." For just a second, her mask slipped. I saw something flicker across her face. Panic, anger, calculation. But then she put on that concerned daughter expression again. "Mama, I think you're confused. I wasn't even here last night. I went home after dinner, remember? Maybe you had a bad dream. Don't lie to me, Carmen. I know what I saw." She stood up and walked over to me, putting her hand on my shoulder like she was comforting a confused old woman. "Mama, you've been under so much stress lately. Taking care of Papa, worrying about his condition. Sometimes our minds play tricks on us when we're exhausted." "My mind is perfectly clear." "Is it? Because yesterday you forgot to give Papa his evening medication. Last week you left the stove on all night. Maybe it's time we talked about getting you some help too." The way she said it, so gentle and caring, but with that underlying threat, that's when I truly understood how dangerous my daughter had become. She was already preparing to paint me as a senile old woman whose testimony couldn't be trusted. "Carmen, look me in the eyes and tell me you weren't in your father's room last night." She stared at me for a long moment, and in her eyes I saw the truth she would never speak out loud. I saw the cold calculation of someone who had already decided her father needed to die. "Mama," she said softly, "even if I was in Papa's room, which I wasn't, but even if I was, Would that really be so wrong? Look at him. He doesn't even remember our names anymore. He can't feed himself, can't use the bathroom alone. Is this really living? That's not for you to decide. Isn't it? I'm the one who's here every day. I'm the one who's going to sacrifice my life taking care of him while Diego lives comfortably in Europe. Don't I have the right to think about what's best for everyone? You mean what's best for you. Her gentle mask finally fell away completely. Yes, Mama. What's best for me too. I'm 45 years old. I've never married, never had children, never lived my own life because I was too busy being the perfect daughter. And for what? So I can spend the next 10 years watching him deteriorate while our savings disappear on medical bills. He's your father, Carmen. He stopped being my father the day he decided his fists were more important than our feelings. Do you remember, Mama? Or are you going to pretend those years didn't happen too? I felt like she had slapped me. Because she was right about Manuel's violence, but she was using that truth to justify something unforgivable. What happened to us doesn't give you the right to become a killer. Killer. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I would be putting him out of his misery, like we do with sick animals. It's called compassion. It's called murder. We stared at each other across my small kitchen, and I realized I was looking at a stranger. The little girl who used to braid my hair while I cooked dinner was gone. In her place stood someone I didn't recognize, someone whose heart had turned to stone. What are you going to do, Mama? Call the police on your own daughter? Destroy what's left of our family over a sick old man who doesn't even know we exist? If I have to. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door, then turned back with a smile that chilled my soul. Good luck explaining to them that you think your devoted daughter is a murderer. Who do you think they'll believe? Me? Or a stressed old woman who's obviously losing her mind? After she left, I sat alone with the terrible knowledge that my daughter was right about one thing. No one would believe me, and that meant she was going to try again. God sometimes puts us before decisions that split our souls in half. For 3 days after that confrontation with Carmen, I barely ate, barely slept. I just knelt before my little altar in the bedroom, staring at the image of La Virgen de Guadalupe that my mother had given me on my wedding day. Virgencita, I whispered through my tears. What am I supposed to do? How can I choose between my husband and my daughter? The house felt different those 3 days. Manuel was having more bad days than good ones, confused and frightened, calling out for his own mother who had died 20 years ago. I would hold his hand and sing him the old boleros he used to love, trying to bring him moments of peace. But every sound in the house made me jump. Every time I heard footsteps, I wondered if Carmen had come back to finish what she started. I found myself sleeping in a chair next to Manuel's bed, watching over him like a guard dog. On the second day, I called Padre Miguel at our parish church. He had baptized both my children, had been our family's spiritual guide for over 30 years. Padre, I need to talk to you about something very serious, something I can't discuss over the phone. That afternoon, I sat in his small office next to the church, surrounded by books and crucifixes, and told him everything. The whole terrible story spilled out of me like water from a broken dam. Padre Miguel listened without interrupting, his weathered hands folded in his lap, his kind eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Isabel, my daughter, this is indeed a burden too heavy for any mother to carry alone. What does God want me to do, Padre? How can I turn my own child over to the authorities? Tell me, what did Jesus do when he saw the money changers in the temple? He drove them out. And why did he do that? Because they were desecrating a holy place with their greed. Exactly. Sometimes love means taking action that feels harsh, but serves a greater good. Your husband's life is sacred, Isabel. It's not Carmen's to take, no matter what pain she carries from the past. But she's my daughter. I gave birth to her. I raised her. And because you love her, you cannot allow her to become a murderer. Think about this. If you stay silent and she kills Manuel, how will she live with herself afterward? How will you live knowing you could have prevented it? Padre Miguel opened his Bible and read to me from Proverbs. Whoever spares the rod hates his child, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. Sometimes, Isabel, the most loving thing a parent can do is to stop their child from destroying themselves. That night, I knelt before my altar again. But this time, I wasn't asking for guidance. I was asking for strength. Señor, if this is what you want me to do, give me the courage to do it. Help me protect Manuel, even if it means losing Carmen forever. As I prayed, I remembered something from my childhood. My own grandmother once told me about a time during the war when she had to report her own brother to the authorities because he was stealing food from hungry children in their village. Isabelita, she had said, love isn't always gentle. Sometimes love has to be as strong as steel to protect the innocent. On the third morning, I woke up with a strange sense of peace. I made Manuel his breakfast, helped him take his medications, and sat with him while he ate. He looked at me with one of his clearer moments and said, Isabel, you look tired, mi amor. Are you worried about something? Just taking care of you, Manuel. That's my job. He reached over and patted my hand with his shaky fingers. You're a good woman, Isabel. The best wife a man could ask for. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. This man had given me 40 years of his life. Yes, he had been difficult, sometimes cruel, but he was still my husband. He was still Carmen's father. He deserved to die with dignity, in his own time, not at the hands of a daughter whose heart had turned to stone. I walked to the phone and dialed the number I had written down days earlier but had been too afraid to call. Police station. I need to report an attempted murder. My voice was steady as I gave them my address, my name, and the details of what I had witnessed. When they asked if I was sure I wanted to file this report against my own daughter, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I'm sure. Please come quickly. After I hung up, I went back to Manuel's room and sat beside his bed. Within an hour, I heard the sound of car doors slamming outside our house. The police had arrived and there was no going back. I had chosen justice over blood, protection over silence. I had chosen to save my husband's life, even if it meant destroying my daughter's future. God help me, I pray I made the right choice. Trials don't just judge crimes, my dear friends. They judge entire families, tear apart relationships that took decades to build, and force everyone to choose sides in wars that nobody wanted to fight. When the police arrested Carmen that day, the news spread through our neighborhood like wildfire. In Latino families, you know how it is. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone thinks they know what really happened, and everyone feels entitled to judge your decisions. My sister Rosa was the first to call, her voice sharp with accusation. Isabel, how could you do this to your own daughter? Family problems should stay in the family. Now the whole world will know our business. My nephew Carlos stopped speaking to me entirely. At the grocery store, he would see me coming and turn down a different aisle. His wife whispered to her friends that I had lost my mind, that I was a bitter old woman who was jealous of Carmen's devotion to her father. But the worst part was waiting for Diego to come home from Spain. He arrived 3 days before the trial began, looking older and more tired than I remembered. The flight from Madrid to Lima had given him hours to think about what was happening to our family, and I could see the weight of it in his eyes. Mama, are you absolutely sure about what you saw? Diego, we've been through this on the phone. I know what I witnessed. I believe you. But this is Carmen we're talking about. My little sister who used to make me friendship bracelets when I was sad. That's what made everything so heartbreaking. We weren't talking about a stranger or some violent criminal. We were talking about a woman we had loved our entire lives, someone who had been part of our daily existence for 45 years. The trial began on a Tuesday morning in September. I had to walk past reporters and photographers who shouted questions at me in Spanish and English. Señora Isabel, why are you testifying against your own daughter? Do you really believe Carmen tried to kill her father? Inside the courtroom, I saw faces I recognized from our neighborhood, from our church, from family gatherings. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with disgust. The room felt divided, like a church wedding, where half the guests support the bride and half support the groom. Carmen's lawyer, a young man with expensive suits and smooth words, painted me as a confused old woman who had imagined the entire thing. He brought up my age, my stress levels, The difficulty of caring for a husband with dementia. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, pointing at me like I was the criminal. This is a tragedy of family dysfunction. Isabel Morales is so overwhelmed by her circumstances that she has created a fantasy in which her devoted daughter becomes a villain. He talked about Carmen's perfect record as a caregiver, her years of sacrifice, her financial support of the family. He made her sound like a saint while making me sound like a delusional old fool. Where is the evidence? He asked. Where are the witnesses? There is nothing but the confused testimony of an elderly woman who admits she was walking in the dark, who admits she has been under tremendous stress. When it was my turn to testify, I felt like I was on trial instead of Carmen. The defense lawyer asked me about every mistake I had made in recent months. The time I forgot Manuel's medication, the night I left the stove on, the afternoon I couldn't remember my own phone number. Mrs. Morales, isn't it possible that what you think you saw was actually your daughter adjusting her father's pillow? Isn't it possible that your mind, under extreme stress, transformed an act of care into something sinister? I looked across the courtroom at Carmen, sitting beside her lawyer in a conservative blue dress, looking like the perfect, dutiful daughter. She had even brought tissues and dabbed at her eyes whenever the prosecutor described Manuel's condition. But I knew what I had seen. I knew the coldness in her eyes, the calculation in her movements, the way she had pressed that pillow down with deadly intent. No, I said firmly. I saw my daughter trying to kill her father. I wish to God I hadn't, but that's what happened. The jury took 2 days to reach their verdict. 2 days during which our extended family argued and whispered and took sides. 2 days during which I questioned everything I thought I knew about love, about family, about right and wrong. When they announced guilty of attempted murder, Carmen's scream echoed through the courtroom. She turned to look at me with such hatred in her eyes that I felt my heart break all over again. I hope you're happy, Mama, she shouted as the bailiff led her away in handcuffs. I hope when you're dying alone you remember this moment. Diego put his arm around me as I collapsed in tears, but I could feel the judgment of everyone around us. Half our family thought justice had been served. The other half thought I had destroyed an innocent woman out of spite. That night, alone in my house with just Manuel's confused mumblings for company, I wondered if I had done the right thing. I had saved my husband's life, but I had lost my daughter forever, and I wasn't sure which loss hurt more. Letters from a child in prison are knives wrapped in paper, my dear friends. They arrive in your mailbox like little bombs, destroying your peace one word at a time. The first letter came 2 weeks after Carmen's sentencing. 8 years for attempted murder. When I saw her handwriting on the envelope, the same careful script I had taught her when she was 6 years old, my hand started shaking so badly I could barely open it. Mama, it began, I hope you can sleep at night knowing what you've done to your own daughter. She wrote about the prison in Corrillos, about her cell that she shared with 2 other women, about the food that tasted like cardboard and the guards who treated them like animals. She described every detail of her suffering as if she wanted me to feel guilty for putting her there. The woman in the bed next to mine killed her abusive husband with a kitchen knife. The other one robbed banks to feed her children. They look at me like I'm the monster, Mama. Even criminals think I'm worse than they are because I supposedly tried to hurt my own father. But then, at the end of that first letter, she wrote something that broke my heart. I dream about you every night. I dream that you come to visit me and tell me this was all a mistake, that you believe me when I say I would never hurt Papa. Every week, another letter arrived. Some were full of anger and accusations. Others were desperate pleas for me to recant my testimony, to admit I had been confused, to somehow undo what had been done. Do you know what it's like to be labeled as someone who tried to kill her own father? Do you know how the other inmates treat me? They call me La Parricida, the father killer. Even murderers have more respect than I do. In another letter, she wrote about the visits from a prison psychologist. Doctor, Vargas keeps asking me about my childhood, about Papa's drinking, about why I might have wanted to hurt him. I tell her the truth, that I would never hurt anyone. But she doesn't believe me. Nobody believes me except God. and sometimes I wonder if even he has abandoned me. The letters became weapons designed to torture my conscience. Carmen knew exactly which words would cut deepest, which memories would make me question everything. I remember when I was 8 and had pneumonia. You stayed awake for 3 nights straight, putting cold cloths on my forehead, making me soup, praying over my bed. You said you would die before you let anything happen to me. Where is that mother now, Mama? Where is the woman who promised to protect me? Some nights I would read her letters over and over until my eyes burned from crying. I would look at the photograph on my dresser, Carmen at her quinceañera, smiling in her pink dress, looking so innocent and full of hope, and wonder if I had destroyed the wrong person. But then I would walk to Manuel's room and see him sleeping peacefully, still alive because of the choice I made, and I would remember why I had to do what I did. The letters weren't all bitter. Sometimes Carmen would write about small kindnesses in prison, an older inmate who shared her bread, a guard who let her call me on Mother's Day, a stray cat that lived in the prison yard and reminded her of the kitten we had rescued when she was 12. There's a woman here named Esperanza who's been in prison for 15 years. She tells me that anger is a poison we drink, hoping other people will die. She says I need to forgive you if I ever want to be free, even if I never get out of this place. Those glimpses of the daughter I remembered were the hardest to read. They reminded me that somewhere inside, the woman who had tried to kill her father, pieces of my little girl still existed. In her Christmas letter, she wrote, "I've been thinking about what you said at the trial, about seeing me with the pillow. I know you believe what you saw, Mama, and I know you think you did the right thing. Maybe I was angrier at Papa than I admitted to myself. Maybe seeing him so helpless brought back all those nights when I was the helpless one." It was the closest thing to a confession she had ever written, and it made me cry for hours. But then the next letter would arrive full of rage again. "Diego visited me yesterday. He's selling the house in Huancayo, did you know that? He's taking care of all the family finances while I rot in here. I was right about him, Mama. He came back from Spain just to make sure he got his inheritance. At least I cared enough to stay and take care of you both." The letters came for 2 years, each one a reminder of the impossible choice I had made. Some days, they made me feel like a hero who had saved her husband's life. Other days, they made me feel like a monster who had betrayed her own child. But slowly, gradually, something in Carmen's letters began to change. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else, a kind of tired sadness, a recognition that maybe, just maybe, she had been capable of something terrible. And that's when I knew it was time to visit my daughter in prison. True forgiveness doesn't come from the heart, my dear friends. It comes from God, because our human hearts are too small and too wounded to forgive the unforgivable on their own. For 2 years, I had carried the weight of Carmen's letters, the burden of our family's destruction, the guilt of a mother who had chosen justice over blood. I went to Mass every Sunday, lit candles for both my husband and my daughter, and begged God to show me how to heal the wounds that seemed to grow deeper every day. It was Padre Miguel who finally spoke the words that changed everything. "Isabel," he said after one particularly difficult Sunday service, "you cannot carry this cross alone anymore. Christ calls us to forgive, not because people deserve it, but because we need to be free. But Padre, how can I forgive someone who tried to murder her own father? How can I pretend that what she did was acceptable? Forgiveness isn't pretending, my daughter. Forgiveness is releasing the poison that's killing your own soul. You can acknowledge that Carmen did something terrible and still choose to love her. That night I knelt before my altar and prayed differently than I had in years. Instead of asking God to help me understand why this had happened, I asked him to give me the strength to do something that felt impossible. Señor, I don't know how to forgive her. My human heart is too angry, too hurt, too confused. But if you want me to visit my daughter in prison, if you want me to offer her forgiveness, then give me your heart instead of mine." I felt something shift inside me that night. Not peace exactly, but a kind of divine stubbornness, a determination to do what God was asking, even if it destroyed me. The next morning I called the prison and arranged a visit. Corrillo's prison is not a place where hope lives. The walls are gray concrete, the windows are barred, and the smell of despair hangs in the air like incense in a church. I had to wait 2 hours in a room full of other heartbroken families, mothers visiting sons, wives visiting husbands, children visiting parents who had made terrible choices. When they finally brought Carmen out, I almost didn't recognize her. She had lost weight, her hair was pulled back severely, and her face looked older, harder. But when she saw me sitting at the small metal table, her tough prison mask cracked just a little. "Mama, you came." "Sí, mijita, I came." We sat across from each other in silence for what felt like forever. I could see her trying to figure out why I was there, whether this was another confrontation or something else entirely. "Are you here to tell me you forgive me?" she asked, her voice bitter. "Because I don't need your forgiveness for something I didn't do. Carmen, look at me." She met my eyes reluctantly. "I forgive you." "For what? For being innocent? For being the victim of your imagination?" "I forgive you for trying to kill your father. I forgive you for the hatred in your heart. I forgive you for the pain you've caused our family. And I forgive you for making me choose between my husband and my daughter." She stared at me like I had slapped her. I wouldn't. Misha, we both know what happened that night. You don't have to admit it to me or to anyone else. But I want you to know that I love you anyway. That's when she broke. Carmen put her head down on the metal table and started crying like she hadn't cried since she was a little girl. Deep, painful sobs that came from a place so wounded I don't think she had ever let herself feel it before. "Mama, I was so angry. So angry at him for all those years of fear. So angry at you for staying. So angry at myself for never being brave enough to leave. When I saw him lying there so helpless, I thought if he was gone, we could all finally be free. Oh, Carmen, I didn't plan it, Mama. I swear to you I didn't wake up that morning thinking I would try to kill him. But when I saw how peaceful he looked, how easy it would be, something dark took over my heart." She looked up at me with eyes full of shame and regret. "I'm not asking you to forgive me because I didn't mean to do it. I'm asking you to forgive me because I did mean to do it, and I've been living with that poison inside me ever since." I reached across the table and took her hands. Hands that I had held when she took her first steps. Hands that I had bandaged when she fell off her bicycle. Hands that had tried to take her father's life. "Carmen, you are my daughter. You are part of my heart. What you did was terrible, unforgivable, and I would make the same choice again if I had to. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. How can you love someone who became a monster? Because monsters can become human again. Because God's love is bigger than our worst mistakes. And because you're still the little girl who used to help me make tamales for Christmas, even if you forgot how to be her for a while. We cried together in that terrible prison visiting room surrounded by guards and cameras and the weight of everything that had been broken between us. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt something like peace. "Mama, can you forgive me for hating you? For writing those awful letters? For blaming you for doing what you had to do?" "There's nothing to forgive, mijita. You were in pain. I've been going to counseling here with Dr. Vargas. She says I need to forgive Papa, too, for the fear he put in our house all those years. She says carrying that anger is what made me capable of what I did." "Your father was a flawed man, Carmen, but he didn't deserve to die for his mistakes. I know that now. I know that what I did was wrong, no matter what he did to us." When visiting time ended and they led Carmen back to her cell, she turned around one more time. "Mama, thank you for stopping me. Thank you for loving me enough to send me here, instead of letting me become a killer." Walking out of that prison, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was fixed. Our family was still broken. Carmen still had years left to serve, and Manuel was still dying slowly from his disease. But I had learned that forgiveness isn't about pretending terrible things didn't happen. It's about choosing love even when love seems impossible. From the most painful ashes, my dear friends, the strongest families can be born. Not perfect families, not families without scars, but families that have learned the difference between love and enabling, between forgiveness and pretending. Today, as I sit in this same chair, where I used to cry over Carmen's letters, I can tell you that miracles do happen. Not the kind of miracles we see in movies, where everything becomes perfect overnight, but the slow, painful miracles of healing that happen one day at a time. Carmen was released from prison 4 months ago after serving her full sentence. She looks different now, older, quieter, but somehow more at peace with herself. The anger that used to burn in her eyes has been replaced by something I can only call wisdom. She lives in a small apartment near the church, works at a non-profit organization helping other women who have experienced domestic violence, and sees a counselor twice a week. We have dinner together every Sunday, but it's different now. We talk about real things, about pain, about healing, about the work it takes to rebuild trust. Mama, she told me last month, I spent so many years hating Papa that I became exactly like him. I became someone who used violence to solve problems. Prison taught me that the only person I was really hurting was myself. Manuel passed away peacefully last year, surrounded by love instead of violence. Diego had moved back from Spain by then, and we were able to care for him together in his final months. Carmen couldn't visit because of her parole restrictions, but she wrote him a letter that Diego read to him during one of his clear moments. Papa, the letter said, I forgive you for the fear you brought into our house, and I ask you to forgive me for the hatred I carried in my heart. We both made mistakes, but God's love is bigger than our mistakes. Manuel cried when Diego finished reading. Even in his confused state, he understood that his daughter was offering him peace. The funeral was small, just our immediate family and a few neighbors from the old days. Carmen was allowed to attend under guard, and I watched her say goodbye to the man she had once tried to kill. She placed a single white rose on his coffin and whispered something I couldn't hear, but I saw her shoulders relax as if a weight had been lifted. Our extended family is still divided. Some relatives have embraced Carmen's return and admire the work she's doing to help other women. Others still believe she's a dangerous person who should be avoided. I've learned to accept that some relationships may never heal completely. But Diego and I have grown closer than we ever were before. He tells me that watching our family nearly destroy itself taught him that running away from problems doesn't solve them. He's dating a lovely teacher named Sophia, and they're talking about giving me grandchildren someday. Mama, he said recently, I used to think you were weak for staying with Papa all those years, but calling the police on Carmen, that was the strongest thing I've ever seen anyone do. Carmen is slowly building relationships with some of our cousins' children, becoming the aunt who teaches them that making terrible mistakes doesn't mean your life is over. She volunteers at the church, helps Padre Miguel with the women's support group, and speaks sometimes to families dealing with domestic violence. I tell them, she explained to me, that children who grow up with violence often become violent themselves if they don't get help. I tell them that it's possible to break the cycle, but only if you're willing to face the truth about yourself. Last week, Carmen brought me a letter she had written but never planned to send. It was addressed to her younger self, the frightened little girl hiding in the closet while her parents fought. I wanted to tell her, Carmen said, that the anger she's feeling is normal, but that she has choices about what to do with it, that she can choose healing instead of revenge, help instead of hatred. As for me, I've learned that being a good mother sometimes means making choices that feel like betrayal. It means loving your children enough to stop them from destroying themselves, even when stopping them breaks your heart. I still light candles for Manuel every Sunday, thanking God for the years we had together and asking forgiveness for the years we wasted on anger. I light candles for Carmen too, thanking God for the second chance she's been given and praying for her continued healing. People sometimes ask me if I regret calling the police that night, if I wish I had handled things differently. The answer is no. I saved my husband's life, I prevented my daughter from becoming a murderer, and I learned that love sometimes requires the courage to do what seems impossible. Our family was broken, yes, but we weren't destroyed. We're proof that even the most damaged families can find their way back to love if they're willing to choose truth over comfort, justice over silence, and forgiveness over revenge. If you're facing impossible choices in your own family, remember this. God doesn't call us to be perfect. He calls us to be brave. He calls us to love people enough to do what's right, even when what's right feels like the hardest thing in the world. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone else's worst impulses. Sometimes protecting someone means stopping them from doing something they can never undo. Today, my daughter is alive. My husband died with dignity, and our family is slowly learning how to be whole again. That's not the ending I would have chosen, but it's the ending that taught us what real love looks like. And that, my dear friends, is a miracle worth sharing.